Hello, and welcome to the Professor Podcast with Ruth and Claire. Each episode, we talk about a particular topic in the life of a professor. We are tenure-track faculty members in the sciences, working at a primarily undergraduate university in California. The purpose of our podcast is reflection, so we bring something we think is working and something we're working on to discuss. Welcome to the Professor Podcast with Ruth and Claire. I'm Claire.
And I'm Ruth. And this week we're going to talk about interactions with challenging students. But before we do that, Claire, how was your week?
My week was good. I wanted to report in that I'm officially using GatherTown instead of Zoom for my class this spring. As we're recording this, it's the week before classes. So I haven't actually tried it out yet. But last week, Ralph and I worked through some of the problems I was having with GatherTown and resolved them. So now we're here to see what the real world problems are. But I wanted to report in that there's no record feature in GatherTown, but I'm going to record it on Zoom, have Zoom going at the same time to get the recording, sharing my screen of GatherTown, which somebody on YouTube did, which was brilliant. And then the other problem I was having was sharing my iPad screen on GatherTown so that I can write notes on the board. And there's a way to make your iPad appear on your desktop screen. A few different ways, but the one I'm using is QuickTime. So anyway, all the problems seem to be resolved, and I'm excited to use it.
That's awesome. And I salute you, because I just want you to figure it all out and then make me a leaflet or something, that kind of thing. Because this semester I'm not doing anything new because I can't cope. So I think that's super cool.
I'm really excited about the potential for students chatting before class and going off and working in groups and me seeing them groups and walking around. I think it'll be a lot of the things that I was missing in Zoom in terms of interactions, I think, will be there in GatherTown. So it was exciting enough for me to launch the new thing.
I think it's going to be awesome because I also think there is, there's quite a lot of Zoom fatigue or
Sure.
I know how this goes. But even just having a little bit more interactability, I don't know if that's an actual word, but that could be just that bit more engaging.
I think so. So. And we also have a space that we physically we virtually walk our little avatars around, and I think that's kind of cool to have a space that's our space. So anyway, I'm excited about it. I'll report back once
I'm excited too.
Done a few classes. Cool. Well, thanks. So how about you? How was your week?
My week was really good. I feel like we're rocking out. That's the theme of my week at the moment.
Nice.
Is I don't know if this is relevant to you because you're, I'm again really patronizing. I'm you're very young, but I don't know if I've talked about it on the podcast either. But there's a show called Cobra Kai.
Oh, that is on our Netflix list, but we have not tried it yet. Tell me about it.
Well, okay, so I don't know if The Karate Kid was a big part of your life, but The Karate Kid had a profound effect on me as a kid.
Okay.
It was deeply moving and very exciting to me. And so Cobra Kai is about some of the characters in Karate Kid when they've grown up.
Cool.
And it's so good. And it's kind of a little bit teen soap opera-y as well, but also with
excellent
fighting. And yes, so it makes me so happy in a way I can't even articulate. So that's super cool. And we also have been having, we've been doing the Tech Sabbath since the summer, and it's still going strong and we love it. And it's really interesting because it sort of really brought CDs back into our life.
Oh.
And I got rid of all my CDs because I was like, what's the point? It's all on the internet. And so we've been there's a local secondhand CD shop. So we bought Pearl Jam 10, which was another extremely formative experience in my life. So
cool.
We've been rocking out to that. And the kids were we were driving somewhere, we were listening to it. They're like, put the windows down because we're really cool. And I was like, well, okay. So we're cruising around.
Rocking.
Yes. Yeah.
That's fun.
And it feels like it's all connected because Cobra Kai, there's a lot of, that's more 80s throwback music. But anyway, it's all good.
Lots of rocking going on.
Lots of rocking.
I love it. And your car.
Yeah.
That sounds so fun.
Yeah. In our really old Prius, we're not exactly the cool, intimidating people. But anyway.
Get your sunglasses.
I know,
too.
we're living large. Yeah. Well, it's either Pearl Jam or Dolly Parton at the moment. So it's quite the mix. But yeah.
Variety, but all good. All good.
Yeah. So I have a quote for this week.
Excellent. What's your quote?
So it's from Cobra Kai. And it's a little bit of a throwback to, do you remember earlier in our podcasting time when I would always have these kind of aggressive quotes?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, and maybe it was like my sort of fantasies of how I wish I was.
Like Professor Snape strolling into the classroom and dashing everyone's dreams.
And exactly, that's my professor goals right there. Well, so this one is from Cobra Kai, and so in the show, it's Johnny Lawrence who is saying it, but originally it was John Kreese. But anywho, so it's strike first, strike hard, no mercy. And that's kind of their ethos, which it isn't really, and they all turn out to be super lovely, not John Kreese. But anyway, so yeah, it's the exact opposite of how I am as a professor, but maybe how I wish I was a little bit more. So yeah.
Maybe because you're so far from that, you could do towards stepping towards that.
Yeah, well, I think... Have we talked about this on here before? The idea of like, could you imagine if you had a student planted in the audience who was like rude to you on the first day, and then you were like, out of here.
Get out.
Yeah, this will not be tolerated. And so, yeah. I'm not even sure I could do that if it was set up. But anyway, it's kind of a wish.
It's fun to imagine, though.
Especially when we're talking about what we're talking about today. So
Yes.
So tell me a bit about what's working for you when dealing with challenging students, or what do you kind of think of when you think of as challenging students?
Yeah, well, there's definitely different kinds of challenging student interactions. I kind of broke it into what's working for me is interacting with the challenging interactions where the students are stressed about grades or falling behind, and I feel pretty comfortable about handling those. But what I'm working on is more like confrontational kind of interactions. So we'll get to that. But so back to students stressed about grades and falling behind. So my approach is to kind of show some understanding and some sympathy, and then to work with them to make a plan for getting back on track. So my goal is that they leave the discussion with a little more confidence that it's doable, and with a clear plan on what the first step is going to be.
I think that's so important to give people a way back, like a pathway to kind of, I'm saying redemption, I don't know if that's quite the word I mean, but like some way of kind of putting things right. Because when it's just like, well, you really messed that up, it's not,
right.
Yeah.
Especially if it's just a mistake or something, they did poorly on one assignment, it seems like there's got to be room for making a mistake. Now, sometimes... Rarely, my recommendation would be to drop the class or something. If somebody was really far behind and it was like, gosh, you really would do a lot better and put yourself in a much better position if you took the whole class again. In those scenarios, usually I start that conversation and then we go from there. And if the student does decide to try to stay in the class, then at least they're coming from a position where they know that it's going to be a big challenge because I've already recommended they're dropping the class.
Yeah.
But that's really unusual. Most of the time, there's got to be a path forward. Most of the time, I think so.
Yeah, and I think I've definitely, sometimes you can even, if it's framed as, if you have this other class that you're doing better in, maybe it's good to drop this and really focus your energy on getting a good grade there. And so, yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. And I think a lot of the times having that kind of discussion with the student where we come up with a scaffolding of how they're going to, end up in a better position than they're currently in is empowering. It could be, at least if done, if it works out. So that's one of my goals. Well,
and it can also help in terms of their frustration level, because it can be yes, and here is what you need to do. And this really isn't in my hands, and it's actually all in your hands. And so,
giving them the ownership and the empowerment to do something about it when they feel like they might be powerless at the beginning of the conversation. Yeah, that makes sense. So what about you? What's working for you, and what are you thinking of with respect to challenging student interactions?
I think for me, what really comes up is people who are angry. Angry, really frustrated. And so I think one thing that came up for me where I worked before was finding out that it was okay to sort of not meet with the student alone. If like I had a student who was sending really aggressive emails and demanding that we meet, and I talked to someone about it, and they were like, you can totally say like, sure, I'll meet with you in the chair's office. And like, you know, and when I did that, they didn't want to meet, and it kind of just faded away, and that was fine.
Okay.
But kind of just knowing that that was an acceptable thing to do was helpful. So that was really good. I think I have had experiences where sometimes asking a student, are you okay, when they're really angry, actually kind of deflates things a bit and sort of can sort of, I don't know, just has created a pause, and then it's like, no, I'm not okay. This is other stuff is actually going on, or this is happening, or there's something else behind it, or I don't know why. It seems like it's sort of like a humanizes the interaction or something.
Yes.
Because sometimes I've had people, have you ever had people and you know they've kind of prepared a speech and they're sort of really fired up? And so, I don't know, sometimes, other times it has not worked. So it sort of depends. So,
but in some cases that diffuses the situation and redirects the conversation towards the actual problem. That's what you're saying, I think.
I was trying to think of how to do this without giving specific examples, but I did have a student who just was a complete fright for the entire semester and just like furious about everything I did all the time. And by the end, I was like, we have to have a one-on-one meeting. And she was really riled up about all the things. And then it's like, are you okay? And then no, she was definitely not okay and was really upset. And then, so I wish I had had that conversation a lot earlier, but I kept kind of hoping it would just sort of get resolved. So that has helped. I think I'm trying to get better at laying some groundwork about how I expect to be spoken to.
Okay.
If you know what I mean, in the beginning.
Like explicitly saying something to the students like about expectations?
Right, like we're all going to be polite and nice to each other. And I think, I don't know if this is unique to physics, but I certainly think there is a little bit of a misunderstanding that sounding kind of like being rude can kind of, it's just you're like this genius person and just no, like being rude is just being rude. It doesn't imply that you're smart or anything. So I think I kind of try and have some conversation about how we're going to interact. Like students will interact with each other, but also with me. So I don't know if that actually helps, but I'm trying to lay some groundwork of how I expect to be spoken to.
It's hard to imagine that wouldn't help to have a conversation about that at the beginning. Yeah.
And it's weird. I think the students that we have here are generally really, really respectful. So it actually hasn't come up for me that much, especially since I started working here. They're generally very respectful.
Yeah, I second that.
Yeah. Okay. Oh yeah, I have one more thing, sorry, that does work.
Okay, great.
And someone told me this early on in my teaching. It was just sort of like being really sympathetic, but also making it clear, like, oh, it's such a shame that you didn't study for this test, or like something that's like, sympathetic tone of voice, but also making it very clear where their responsibility lies for whatever is happening.
Sympathetic and firm line. Yeah. Like you're not going to let them retake the test, but you are sorry that they failed the test or whatever it is, you know? And you'll help them do better for the next test, but there's nothing that can be done about this previous test.
Exactly.
Is that,
Yeah, and just sort of like, oh, I'm so sorry that you didn't do that. Instead of like, just whatever it is. So yeah, that has worked too.
That more gives the impression that you and them are on the same side.
Right,
you are
totally.
Both trying to get them to learn and demonstrate that they've learned and complete these assignments. And, this is too bad that it didn't work on this particular case. Now, but you're not putting the blame on them, although you are making sure that they're aware that they can fix it in the future.
Well, I think, and I'm going to talk more about this, but I think in some of my sort of natural tendencies to placate angry dudes, sometimes I would sort of almost take responsibility for, you know what I mean? And so just having a way of being very non-threatening while also being like, this is not a me thing. So, yeah.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah. So tell me, what are you working on?
Well, it's interesting. It's very similar. So yeah, I'm working on confrontational student interactions. Yeah. And I guess, like I was thinking about this and going through, and I actually the thing I'm working on is internal. It's how I feel about it and respond to it internally. So, for example, if a student is questioning my teaching style or my grading scheme, I generally like to nip that in the bud. As soon as I'm aware that somebody's questioning that, I'll explain why I do it that way, so that at least they don't think I'm just thoughtlessly doing it.
Mm-hmm.
They might still disagree with me, and that's totally fine if they think it should be done some different way, but at least they know that I'm doing it intentionally and for a reason, and they can hopefully that gives them more respect of the decision. And then another challenging confrontational thing is if they don't back down once I've already said no and explained why the answer's no.
Oh, no.
So that just becomes a big deal to me, and I don't back down. If the answer's no, the answer stays no, but it just sticks with me, like when I was thinking about this, I could think of all these particular incidents and I still remember them. And that, I don't know, I don't want that to be the case. So I guess what I'm working on is my mindset so that these confrontations don't become as big a deal to me. And I think your approach of diffusing them is a great idea. And another one that came up when Ralph and I were talking about this was, in the middle of the confrontation, try to think to myself, this poor student is having a bad day.
Right.
Because so often, like in a lot of the examples I was thinking of, I know something about them having a bad day. And if those are just the ones I know of. So that's probably often the case. It's probably not really about my grading scheme or whatever. It's about something else. So just to remind myself of that.
It's so hard to not take it personally, though.
It's very hard not to take it personally.
It is. And I have a few things to say.
Yeah, tell me.
One is, I don't know, this is sort of unsolicited advice, but...
okay, great.
You're like, I'm familiar with this from you, so here we go. When you're talking about nipping it in the bud with the people questioning your teaching?
Yeah.
So last semester I did a thing, so I have one data point.
Okay,
But
great.
I have written on my piece of paper beside me right here, it says, you're not the only one in the class, which is not what I actually say, because that sounds really aggressive. But I was trying to say, in that first class, there's certain parts of this class are not going to appeal to you and will not be your cup of tea, but there's all different kinds of learners in this class. So, and that seemed to somehow, who knows why, maybe it was just because last semester was online, but it seemed to deflate a little bit more some of the grumbling about certain things that I have them do. So there you go. That's the unsolicited advice. But dude, I take it so personal. And that thing, like you said, if you say no and someone comes back, like I feel really disrespected and like having your boundaries pushed. And then sometimes I end up telling myself a whole story about why they're doing that. Like they wouldn't do this to so-and-so. They're only doing this because I'm whatever. And so it's really hard.
Sure. And then it does become, and I think if there is this push, as long as I'm confident that the answer's no, I need to stay firm that the answer's no. And in particular, if it's an ongoing thing, because now if I say yes, at some point, now we know that Claire will change her mind if you keep pushing. And that's definitely not the message I want to send. So as long as I'm confident the answer's no, I want to stay no. Yeah.
It's just so weird too, just the range of experiences you have, because some students are just so unbelievably respectful. And like, I hate to ask, I don't want to, and like it's something completely reasonable, and then someone else is just like totally out there and then pushing and pushing, and yeah.
I like your idea of talking about the different parts of the class and how they are targeted to different learning styles. And so naturally, some of them will appeal more to some people than others, and that's intentional. And in fact, one of your former students was in my class last semester, and he said something like that to me. So I don't know if you managed to convey that to this student in particular, but he said something like, well, this part doesn't appeal to me, but I know I'm not the only person in the class. And I was like, wow,
okay.
That's great. So, yeah.
Yeah, because it's sort of interesting too with the it kind of being on the other receiving end of the homeschooling, and like some parents I've spoken to are like, oh, I hate this bit. And I'm like, oh, actually, that's the bit that my kid finds the easiest. And,
right.
it's just very...
Of course.
Yeah. none of this is catered to one person. So, yeah.
Yeah. And I do want to say one more thing about the nipping it in the bud. Like, one part of a class that I teach regularly, a large portion of the class is getting accurate results. And that's always gets a little pushback, you know, because you're like, I did the report perfectly, but I only got 15 out of 25 because my number was so bad. And so that is a moment where I nip it in the bud to the whole class. And I say, hey, remember, this class is quantitative analysis. You're learning how to be quantitative in the laboratory, so a large portion of the grade is being quantitative. And, you know, and then I explain that there's lots of reports and they've got time to learn how to be quantitative and get better accuracy in the future. So anyway, maybe that's kind of similar. It's not the same, like, different learning styles.
No, but I think
the
it's
same
good
thing
to
as
just
addressing it directly. Yeah,
totally.
Yeah. So yes, what about you? What are you working on?
Yeah, I'm really scared of angry dudes. So that's like really hard for me because and I feel like sometimes, yeah, I don't know. I just like I'm really don't do well with confrontation at all. And weirdly, I've had at least 2 or maybe 3 situations of older guys getting like really furious with me and like kind of I can know that that probably isn't actually to do with me and it was like something else going on for them.
Yeah.
Or, you know, whatever. But it was really, really scary for me. And like I felt embarrassed about how scared I felt, even though I'm not sure if it was like clear, you know, but I felt really stressed about it. And so, and I think, I mean, I don't know, I don't want to like mention the elephant in the room, but like sometimes when you wonder about violence, like could something happen in your classroom? And when you have people who are maybe kind of getting progressively more and more agitated.
Yeah.
You know, and I've had students in my class who get so angry and not at me, but just their general level of agitation or things they're talking about the university, or it's just really disturbing, you know? And so that I think, and the other thing that is a real problem for me is that my face completely betrays me. Like,
me
and I
too.
go bright red. And then like sometimes I get a really trembly voice if I'm feeling like upset or anxious, or sometimes I even, and like this is deeply frustrating, but I get kind of teary when I'm mad. So like I could not, I'm not actually crying, but I'm just like so furious about something. I get like a kind of a trembly, teary voice, and that is really frustrating.
Undermines.
Right, because I'm trying to be
approach.
like, you know, whatever approach I'm trying to have. The strike first approach, but whatever. But like even just not, you know, cowering in a corner, and then my face totally betrays me.
Sure.
So
sure. You want to stand firm and take whatever approach you want to take.
Right.
And I'm sure as we get more comfortable with these situations, there'll be less, you know, automatic reaction in faces betraying us.
I don't know, man. My face is it's never been my friend with this stuff. But
so back to the angry students. I wonder what kind of things could be taken to make it less of a potentially escalating situation. Like there's campus police, of course, that could be called if need be. I also wonder whether somehow diffusing them. It seems like you've got some really good approaches for diffusing confrontational escalating situations on a one-on-one kind of thing. I wonder if there's some similar ones we could employ in a classroom to take it down a couple notches, you know?
And like so my very first year teaching, I can remember a student after a test, and he was like a nice guy, but he came up and like got in my face, like really, and like I really went back to my office and absolutely sobbed. Like I was totally terrified. And so it's just really hard to be the grown-up while you're also like a human person.
And that's a perfect example. He obviously was having a bad day.
Totally.
He had just done poorly on this test. That is the problem. It wasn't you. But it is a problem if he's going to be violent or at least angry. So how to deal with that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it is like, I don't know. I don't know how much to get into this too, but when dealing with, yes, calling campus police, like that feels like such a huge escalation.
Sure.
But there has been times where it's felt like, okay, is this getting to the necessary point?
I would think a step before calling police would be to tell that person to leave.
Right.
If they finished a test, then, I mean, finished a test is not the time to talk about a test, just in general. But anytime somebody's angry, that's probably not the time to talk about it either.
No, and I actually I haven't done it while we're online, but I had implemented, I'm not going to talk to you about the test until tomorrow. So don't go home and digest it and read my comments and write something down and bring it back. Mm-hmm. But I did. One semester I had a student come to class super drunk. And it actually all worked out fine because I was really, you have to leave. He's like, and I was like, we're not discussing this. You're going, and that's it. And
nice.
It worked out, handling. But I was like, oh man, if this didn't work out, what am I going to do? Like wrestle this kid out the door? Like this is not going to happen. So I was just.
I bet that most of the time it would work though. If you just keep saying calmly, you need to leave. You could even open the door for them. I would be surprised. Surely most of the time that works.
Yeah. We actually have the technician for our labs is just a genuinely really lovely, decent person. Mm-hmm. And because the other thing is like sometimes I feel embarrassed about admitting in a department that's mostly male, hey, I'm kind of like really scared of this dude. And so it feels, I don't know, like a lady problem or something that I'm bringing. And so I really appreciate he has sometimes proactively been like heard something and just maybe come in. And
that's nice.
And it was incredibly welcome. Because that's the thing,
that's fantastic.
Think maybe, and when I had talked to him about it, he was like, I wasn't sure if that would be overstepping. And I was like, overstep all you like. But he wasn't actually overstepping, but I was like, yes, please.
Yeah.
That's helpful.
No, that's and that's another good idea. If you expect that if there's some repeated incident and you're worried about it, then maybe get some backup in advance to just stand there. That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's a great idea.
Because it can be scary for sure.
Mm-hmm. I really like that idea. So we've got asking them to leave, we've got having somebody there as backup, and we've got having a meeting with them with the chair or somebody else as well. All of which seem very doable to me. Which makes me empowered about this situation.
Right, and sometimes actually, this is a technique from children rearing, but
excellent.
It's called like sports casting, almost, where you sort of narrate what's happening.
Okay.
And sometimes, I mean, not so much with kids, but like it has a different purpose with kids. But sometimes I've had interactions where I'm like, "You're really angry right now." We're like, and just even that being reflected back on a person.
Interesting.
Or like, you seem very upset right now. Let's talk about this tomorrow. Or just some, like, this is what's happening. Or, I don't know.
That does seem like it would really switch. It'd break the cycle that they have going in the emotions right then to state something unexpected like that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But it's something I think this is one of the great unspoken things in our job. And it's certainly the thing that we get no training for at all. And so it's really the first time it happened when I kind of was thinking about that and putting myself back in those shoes. Because it wasn't clear to me what I could do.
Right.
Like, am I allowed to say, no, I'm not speaking to you right now? Or like,
sure.
Am I
allowed to throw them out of the classroom? Yeah, exactly.
So I think and that's the stuff that comes with a bit of experience. But it was really scary.
Sure.
Yeah.
Definitely. Well, this is very helpful to reflect on for me.
Yeah, me too.
So, thank you very much.
Yeah, good stuff. not the most cheerful topic, but there we go.
But I feel much more empowered about these situations from hearing.
Well, that's the thing. I think
approaches.
Having a little bit of a script has been really helpful for me, or just knowing, what we can say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love it.
Cool. Thanks so much for joining us on the Professor Podcast with Ruth and Claire. We're delighted to have you as a listener, and we would love to hear from you. And if you want to email us, our address is contactprofessorpodcast@gmail.com. We'd love to hear any of your suggestions for future shows or professor quotes that you might want to share with us, or even just things that have come up for you when you were listening to previous episodes. And if you've been enjoying the podcast, we would love if you would spread the word. So the best way to spread word is by telling people you know if you think they should listen to it, or you can leave us a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.